Okay. Hello, everyone. I wanted to record an important episode. Okay, so dear viewers, I have had a new insight. And so I thought I'd clear this up. To start it off, the starting point, I'm an individual, probably one of the very few on this planet, who has spoken a lot about the importance of the advanced civilization, the importance of civilization 2.0, the importance of the advanced humanity, and you don't know how many sleepless nights I've tried to solve this problem of the human future. And so I realized something very interesting today. Believe it or not, it was from a random Osho lecture. And aside from who an individual is, the content that their mind generates is worth looking at. The reason this episode is titled My Apologies to the non-dual community is because I heard something so profound, and yet it has left me in a sort of mystery. In these talks of mine, I personally have understood that regardless of our personality, there is a presence. The ancients would call it awareness of awareness. And so, in my early attempts as a young man, the realization I had about the soul, many people have spoken about it as if it's something, like a Casper ghost thing that goes, from one lifetime to another, a transmigratory soul. But in my experience in this lifetime, the way I have come to understood this idea is that through my direct experience, it arose to me as the presence of my whole moment. Now, to explain why I'm apologizing is because the idea of an advanced civilization, I'm a human being who spoke about the past, spoke about the present, and my lectures have gone towards speaking about the future. Something very interesting I heard is that the idea of the ego, the idea of our sense of self. We human beings have a sense of self. You look at most people, their sense of self, some consider it's based on the past, some consider it's based on who they want to be in the future. But something very interesting about the idea of ego, this is something I heard from the lecture, All right, there we go. So, dear human beings, my realization follows the simple view that the idea of the future keeps the ego going. Many human beings on this planet in history have wondered about the idea of enlightenment. They have wondered about the idea of moksha. I have spoken about this idea in numerous ways in these lectures, but the insight I got now was that in the effort that I am putting in this lifetime, could there be an error? And personally, I don't feel there is an error, but through a logical view, I thought, okay, it's important to create a sort of backup system and to tell anybody who in the future or now may find these Mr. Within talks to be a sort of, invisible friend. An inspiration for these talks really was that I was a pretty lonely person. And so, when you don't have something, there's this feeling that you don't want others to feel it, to experience the absence. And so there was something in my mind that felt that many human beings will feel alone, and the sincerity in cyberspace was absent. And so my effort was to share. And inspired by the quote from the poet Rumi, "Before death takes away all that is given, give away all there is to give. But in what I have given, there is an idea where I'm pretty much looking at this earth as a biological entity, constantly thinking about, okay, what is that one great argument that every argument will go towards? And my heart conceived that as the idea of the advanced civilization. But what I'm realizing is that at the same time, having a goal, having a purpose keeps the self, keeps an incomplete psychic self at bay. And so I'll tell you the insight I got, and then I'll compare it to my own views. What I mean, what I've spoken before. So the most fascinating realization I got, this was from a recent lecture I heard online, was this idea that the ego exists between the present and the future. And as long as a person wants something in the future, an incomplete idea of self will manifest. The apology I want to give is actually to what may happen in the future. I feel that these talks will bypass it, the force that moves them. However, just in case, just to say it, I want to apologize to all those human beings who have been in the here and now, and it took them a while to get to that realization. However, I want to also explain why, as a being, my intentions for the future have a strictness about them. The idea of ourself is something that we don't learn to be responsible for. We become responsible for the body of ourself. The ideas of ourself relate to that body, but to become responsible for your mind, one has to see their mind. Because you can see your body, you can attend to hygiene, take care of it, eat food. When you get sick, go to the doctor. But when it comes to the mind seems to be a sort of invisible verb, motivating the visible nouns. The idea is that pretty much in this lecture I heard the idea that anybody who tells you any idea of the future, any idea gives you a sort of purpose, a sort of goal, that can sort of imprison the enlightened presence. There is a simplicity, think of it this way, that in this lifetime there are two approaches, and both approaches are in some sense accessed. A person goes through both of them. The simple approach is how everything is simply here, that if you just be rather than become, you're free. There is a freedom there. But so in some sense what I'm trying to say is I'm apologizing to human beings that the idea of the advanced civilization might give them a sense of self where that sense of self may feel inhibited, may feel limited. Because what I'm really doing in these Mr. Within talks is that I'm this human being that found myself going through a past and then constantly being left in the present. And every morning that I log into the conscious waking state, I wonder about the big questions and what are their significance. If somebody said, Mr. Within, what is the best way to be in this world? I would say there is an approach similar to how it's explained in the Tao Te Ching, action through inaction. To release yourself from the sufferings of the inner realms, all you have to do is just be present. Be so present that you notice what's moving. But in the idea of the advanced civilization, there is an incredible significance in the future. I'm pretty much this human being saying we gotta become advanced. You know, but then ancients are saying you are advanced. And so I'm kind of stuck here in between. I'm not actually stuck, but I'm saying that it's like I'm seeing both possibilities. I'm seeing a human being that could be born on this earth and not have a care for the past or the future, just like how some people reach a state of mind where they have no friends or enemies because everything is a movement of reality. Everything is a grand happening. So there is a way you can be in this life present beyond your personality, free from the burdens of the personality. But all those who care for earth, because if you care for beyond earth, you don't need to care for earth. It's like somebody who's driving to somewhere else. All the places they pass by, it's as if it was just a glance, and then they're going somewhere else. But there is also this idea that we can never reach the future. And it's like that. It's like how Salvador Dali says, do not fear perfection, you'll never reach it, because constantly the ego updates itself in accordance to the new information that realigns its expectation. And you know what's funny? When I say my apologies to the non-dual community, the non-dual community is actually no one. So apologizing to non-duality is like shouting in emptiness, shouting in an empty canyon. But it's important because, this is the power of solitude and loneliness. You discover your own insignificance and you care for a significance beyond you. In this moment, my vision moves like this. In consideration to the dimension that my attention is in, I find a sort of response available. When I look in front of my eyes in the outer realms, I see 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere. The type of civilization we're living in is the first prototype. All the evil people on the planet, regardless of what they do, it's a sort of approach of looking at them and being like, okay, they don't know better. Or the savageness of the savageness that led to the civility we have now. It's as if that savageness, it was required, but in some sense it is at the same time. It's like when your younger sibling, if you had one, I don't have one, but I can imagine. If my younger sibling did something wrong, I would look at my sibling and in some sense be like, oh, okay, he doesn't know better. And there is also this quote, this saying that says, people may not know the savageness it took to become this gentle. So the species had to make mistakes to realize what's correct to do. Our civilization, our civility is an advancement, it's an upgrade. When you go back in history, you see a sort of savageness and you see an impatience. What has actually happened, what has turned us into civilized human beings, is that we have become very patient in the outer realms, but still people are impatient in the inner realms. This is why there's rudeness, right? That means people used to be physically violent, and some people are on the planet, but most people are attempting to live civilized. You know, guys, I'm going to turn off the music, actually. So, it took a while for us to become civilized. People were savage. Now in the inner realms we require to be civilized, but what I'm realizing is that the strategy towards one's mind and the strategy towards one's body could be different. So therefore it was as if it was like one situation and people were trying to get enlightened and unenlightened. Sorry, not unenlightened. People were unenlightened and trying to get enlightened, a sort of dualistic response. But I'm this person saying, okay, it's multiple dimensions. We could see a sort of trio of a visible dimension, an invisible dimension, which refers to the mind and what you see behind your eyes, and an inconceivable dimension, which is the unknown watcher of all the things that you synchronistically align to know. In the visible dimension, in regards to the body, I'm considering that an advanced civilization again is the greatest argument. It's what we require to do as physical creatures. But when I think about what we require to do as non-physical creatures, as beings of mind, it's to realize how the mind is being and the mind is being. In the outer realms, there requires a complex response to the world. In the inner realms, it requires a simple acceptance of its nature. You know, I found it very fascinating that unless I consider the future or the past, what sort of sense of self do I have? Do you see the ability human beings have? We start off being present, and then our attention animates a subjective sense of self. So the realization I've had is that if people want enlightenment, you don't have to become. You don't per se need a sort of advanced future mission. And anybody who wants to become enlightened, that's the sort of, fallacy. It's like they say self-realization. There was something there before yourself arrived, and so yourself realizes it. There is so much of our lives that is being unconsciously moved. That when you actually think about what the human being has control over, it has control over certain chunks, certain perceptions. It's as if I always wondered, why is it that the heart is beating without us thinking, but in order to move our hand, we have to think. We have to consider. And so I think this is the sort of situation, the existential situation, that we have to consider the future to, in some sense, protect and survive as a body. But if you want to, I don't know what the word is, I don't want to say survive, but if you want to, let's say, realize as a mind, you gotta for a moment just consider who you are if there was no past or future, and you'll see that how simply everything is being, and then you become released. Your soul becomes released from the expectations of itself, because everything is simply being. You know, it's as if right now, if you want to think about it, like it's when somebody thinks, okay, I'm gonna go do this in the future, human beings are thinking of just training the brain. They're training the body and the like the physical body and the brain, like our muscles, right? So we can move our so of course there's a whole nervous system, but I'm trying to say that when a human being, let's say you ask a human being, hey, what do you want to do in the future? And they're like, I want to become this kind of person, right? And then you ask them, okay, what do you need to do to become that kind of person? And the person's like, I gotta physically train and I gotta get knowledge. Knowledge refers to the brain, and the physical training refers to, let's say, the muscles. But I'm trying to say that a lot of stuff in the human experience is just automated. And so if you don't have a consideration of wanting to be something in the future, you're actually released from the heavier feeling man. This ad. I'm trying to say that if you don't live as a sense of self with a complete realization that you are the presence of your whole moment, then you realize there's nothing to do because it's all being regardless. But if as a human being you're not satisfied with the context of your world, if you're not satisfied with the way Earth is, then you're required to descend from the heavenly realms of the here and now and to realize that there's a responsibility. Now, I have been thinking about, I speak about the advanced humanity and the advanced civilization, and I say that advanced humanity brings this advanced civilization. But in the approach of what is the most advanced way for human beings to build an advanced civilization, the logic would follow that advanced beings can build an advanced world, and the most advanced state of mind follows synonymous is synonymous to the idea of moksha, nirvana, and enlightenment. So what I'm trying to say is that the most advanced civilization, or think of it this way, that the idea of the ego arises because of the person has an expectation of the future. The expectation of the future gives them an incomplete self, and because of that sense of self, the moment is incomplete, but at least they can specify in a certain task. Many people have said that anxiety is related to the future, based on what you want to be and you can't, or what you think will be denied in the future. So I'm trying to say that the most advanced state, it's becoming more and more as the days are going by clearer to me, that the advanced humanity is advanced in the outer realms with a complete trust of the world, and advanced in the inner realms with a complete trust in how it's all being. You see behind your eyes the nature of it, like the greatest clue is that you're being present and then you experience. So it's as if the first experience is being somewhere, and then that somewhere changes and stuff happens there. So there is an awareness to a space, and then what happens in the space becomes the story of your life. But I'm saying if you identify as the space, which is in the notion of being in the present, in the same scope of we created time, so everything doesn't happen all at once, as the saying goes. It's as if beings who have, let's say, the most advanced state of a human being is a human being that trusts every dimension it has access to. And so, what sort of psyche, that means what sort of minds will usher in the advanced civilization? And I'm getting the sense that if the human mind trusted everything, it would have no reason to be a self. There's a certain distrust in what may happen or what has happened that makes the individual remain as a sort of subjective point, subjective self. And then that subjective self is bound to suffering, right? So anyways, what I'm trying to say, it's kind of like a zoom in and zoom out. Okay, when you zoom out, you come to the here and now, and you're just being alongside everything else that is being. So what sort of task is there to do? But if you want to invent something, if you want to build something, if you want to redesign the blueprints of civilization, then you must zoom in out of perfect being into an imperfect being that has the purpose to change. That means we need to have senses of self enough to, in some sense, get the ball rolling for the advanced civilization, but the most advanced state that actually brings it is a selfless state. So what I'm saying is that behind your eyes, there is that which builds the advanced civilization, those who build the advanced civilization, behind their eyes they are no one, in front of their eyes they are a self living for everyone. You see, guys, a sort of honor from the human experience has been stripped away. Back in the day, knights served the kingdom, or heroes had a sort of code, or they were living for others. Kings had kingdoms to hold, to maintain. But right now, when you look at the effort of the human being, it's as if they have stripped the species from its collective effort. And they have convinced everybody, think of it this way. Right now, if you ask 8 billion people on the planet, what do you want? I think most people want to meet their desires. But their desires are individualistic. That means, think about it, dear viewer. In this lifetime of yours, how much of your attention has been on yourself? How much of your attention has been on others? And how much of your attention has been on the world? I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't even know how long I'll be here. But there is something that I feel the advanced civilization will restore the honor of many individuals. It's a necessary purpose, that those who are lost will find. It's like the idea is like this. Let's say if your sense of self, your sense of self, you've lived inefficiently as a sense of self. You're like, okay, I have no honor for myself, so let me check what other type of honor I can have. And then you see you can live for others. But let's say you see that the living for others, and in some sense the others, they are also lacking honor. So then you go try to find another type of honor. That honor either becomes nature or the world. And if that honor is not there, if the world is so meaningless to you, then the mind is left to having a sort of transcendental honor. I found it very fascinating that you see the atheist telling the theist God doesn't exist, but I was laughing when I was seeing these theist debates online, because the theist never went and said, hey man, the idea of yourself doesn't exist. You see, the self that says, and the idea of self that says any other idea doesn't exist, it's as if the self has an equivalent abstraction as any other idea. So what I'm trying to say is that to live for the future is fiction. To be in the present is non-fiction. But we need the fiction to update the non-fiction so the future generations can purely be in non-fiction. You see, at some point, anything a person does, they will question it. I'll tell you this, one of the things I have to my name is that I've talked a lot. Okay? I actually never thought I'd talk this much. I was a very introverted, shy kid, But I've realized that any project requires a ridiculous effort, and this is the sort of problem we have in current society, and it's the problem with being too smart. Okay? So what it is that the intellect needs to find a reason to exert energy. When a person becomes an idea of self, that self becomes a filter. Do you know? Or becomes a sort of authorization. That means if I think I'm a good person, right, suddenly all good actions are authorized and bad actions are unauthorized. If I suddenly think I'm a bad person, then bad actions are authorized and good actions are like, what is that? Do you know? So you see what I'm saying? The type of sense of self you have constraints or filters the type of options you have in reality in regards to your engagement with the world. Somebody did this. I saw this in this, I think it was a TikTok video or something. There was this sentence, there was this like song lyric, like some sort of song lyric, okay? And the person in the video said, whatever you look at, they said they had two phrases that were similar to the sound of the song, and the person said, whichever you look at first, then your mind actually hears that. So the idea behind that video was this, that what type of subjective acceptance you have opens up what sort of meaning you can see in the outer realms. Okay, so if you what right now, whoever you are listening to me, okay, the idea you have of yourself right now in this moment, okay, that idea is filtering what you accept or don't accept. But when you're fully in the present, okay, meaning that you become no one to everything that is here, then there is no filter. So do you see the hilarious thing? We need the future to update civilization, but in order to experience ultimate reality, we require to be present. And so my apologies to the non-dual community was just this idea that, guys, I've been talking about the advanced civilization because we need to update this place. Like, does it update itself? Like, I don't know, do buildings, like trees, like grow into better buildings? No. Right? The human mind is required. So what I'm noticing here is that to be enlightened means to become no one. And you may ask, how do you become no one? By noticing that that sense of self that you think you are is being watched by you, by your whole moment. Okay? So I guess this is the idea I'm trying to say, okay, just to as a backup system for human beings that might suddenly take the idea of the advanced civilization too extremely, okay? There will be human beings who will be born for this, okay? They will be born here to just go and advance the civilization, you know? So if you want freedom just for yourself, it's super easy. For a second, wonder if there was no future and past. You'll realize no ego can take shape. The ego takes shape when there is an intention to change. I'm telling you, this was like such a fascinating realization. That means before I speak, who am I? Before I move, who am I? Before I consider my attention, whether in the inner realms or outer realms, goes to anything, who am I? It's just being here. You see, it's kind of like how Alan Watts was like, yo, you know, a tree apples and the planet people. So freedom of self, if you want freedom for an individual here, you don't need to be an individual. That's the way. It's ironic. But if you want freedom for the future generations, for all those unborn beings that will enter Earth, and they will come here and they will look at what's going on and they will wonder what we've been doing. I've often said it in these talks that what inspires me, I mean, to be honest, I'm not like the most social butterfly. You know, there isn't that many human beings I know on this planet. Simply because the way I find my mind, you know, like even one of the biggest, I guess, impediments to my own social activity was my own belief that, you know, if I get too close to people, they would get scared of my mind. They would get scared of how I see things. But what I want to say is, oh, you who are striving for enlightenment, oh, you who you want ultimate peace, ultimate clarity, I am realizing that I am not asking the unenlightened to build an advanced civilization. I am saying that as a human being on this planet, upon reaching a sort of contentment of being, what is there to do? That means when you become a very advanced being, then you don't need to have an ego about the advanced civilization. Advanced activity happens. So the conclusion, I think this is the gem of this episode, the pearl of this episode, that the advanced civilization, so the logic would follow something like this, the, let's say, philosophical code that's in my mind right now. Let me see if I could even write it. So I would say, in order to build an advanced civilization, or an advanced civilization, we require advanced beings. Now the second idea is, the second line is advanced, the most advanced have no idea of advancement, of advanced. So what does that mean? That means, why aren't human beings trying to be human beings? Why are human beings trying to get enlightened, for example? Right? Like, a human being doesn't try to be a human being because it's being. Right? And so it would, for the idea would follow that an enlightened being wouldn't try to be enlightened because it already is. So the idea would also follow that an advanced being wouldn't try to be advanced because it already is. Now, if an advanced being doesn't need to try to be advanced, it's another way of saying, this is another way of saying, the most advanced state of being is actually not a state of self. You're not being a self, you're being before the self. So here's the funny thing, okay? If an advanced being doesn't need to try to be advanced, then to build an advanced civilization, okay, if an advanced being doesn't need to try to be advanced because it already is, then in the outer realms, it doesn't need to be an idea of self trying to advance things. So I'm pretty much saying, I think the advanced humanity that I've been speaking about through these lectures is a type of human being that actually, behind their eyes and to themselves, they're just being. But in the outer realms, because they're being, they have no problem being more. Do you see? It's like, I'm saying, it's like somebody who's advanced doesn't have an idea of trying to be advanced, but automatically builds the advanced civilization, and if needs to, projects an idea of self. Right? So I'm saying, so it's kind of like this, where I'm saying, imagine somebody has their two archers, one of them, two people that suddenly they open their eyes and they have like a arrow being pressed back on a bow in their hand, two archers, okay? One archer has no clue what he's doing, the other archer has a clue what he's doing, okay? The archer that has no clue why the bow is in its hand, why it's pulling back the arrow, right? It may suddenly freak out, it may think it has to do something specific. But with the human being that has understood the idea of archery, that person doesn't suffer. Do you understand? So it's like a certain range of suffering happens. Pretty much the advanced humanity is beings that are selfless in their inner realms, and in the outer realms they can in some sense be any self. You know, when I think about it right now, the world has been ushered into domains of mind that it's actually not experiencing its existence. So imagine that a fictional experience is blindfolding us of a non-fiction existence. But the fictitious existence is in some sense no existence at all. It's just existence being, right? It's like an existence without an idea. To be honest, the original Earth, as full as it was an empty place. In reality, there are no beings here. There are no beings here. Everybody is no one. But in our attention and effort to change, we become as many things as required, right? Somebody once said, happiness is not getting what you want, it's enjoying what you have, something in those lines. When you really look at it as a being, what you have just being. And being is non-conceptual. That means those people who go towards non-duality, for a long time I felt it was like, okay, this is dehumanized. It's like somebody, it's like an ice, you know, that has shape, and then the person goes towards non-duality, and then the ice melts, and it's like, yo, it's just water. Everything is water, you know. But to add to the previous ice, we require to become ice. I mean, this is a weird metaphor, but you know, it works. So what I'm trying to say, I'm trying to give the viewers my the current metaphysical state, or I shouldn't say metaphysical, the current state of mind I have reached after all these years. That there is actually a true happiness when there isn't an incomplete subjective self. This incomplete subjective self has such a burden on people that they may feel to get rid of the incompleteness of their subjectivity, they have to get rid of their objectivity. But in reality, it's the idea that in some sense conjures suffering. My current view is this, that in all these years of moving and watching the movements of my inner realms, there is nothing to be anymore. In the inner realms, okay? In the inner realms, it's like your hand was inside a river and you're like, yo, this river is freezing cold and my hand is freezing. Why am I suffering so much? And then somebody says, yo, take your hand out of the river. And you take your hand out of the river and you just realize the river is a river. You realize all the thoughts, all the ideas, all the visions, they're just a flow, a rhythm. So I have reached this point where if my attention doesn't have an expectation of the future, I am no one, and no one can suffer. But in order to update the outer realms, we got to be someone. You see what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to say is we have to selflessly use ourselves honorably to advance civilization. But if we realize that the self is in accordance to an expectation of time, pretty much what I'm telling you is that if there was no time, who would you be? You can't say I'm my past, I'm my memories if there's no time. You know, if there's no filter of time. If there is no idea of future, you still can't say who you will become. Do you see? That means it's honestly fascinating. More and more I'm starting to understand the geometry of this world. The geometry of this world is that, first of all, there's some bizarre clues to it, okay? One clue is that it's huge and it's so vast and it's so big. That's one clue. The other clue is that it's changing. Not only was an infinitely vast world, not enough, but it's like we're also changing in the middle of this, right? But also another point is that we are alive, let's say the human lifespan for 100 years. Let's say we're alive for 100 years. And then it ends. Do you understand? So it's this bizarre situation that if you want to become free of the world, you have to actually stop being anything here. But if you want to update the world, then comes the idea of the future and you become a self. And so this is the type of suffering in these, you don't know, if you go and hear like the past talks of mine, like the past, 10 talks, you're gonna be like, yo, this guy's emotional. But I finally realized that what I was conflicted with. If I want an individual victory, it is to renounce the world, which there is the idea of time, which constantly renders me as an incomplete self wanting to be complete, which never finishes until the 100 years finishes and the body is done. I'm saying this is the bizarre situation. We're here for a little while, but there's actually no one here if there is no time. If there is no context of time. So I would say being alive on earth is a selfless opportunity to be a self that advances the world until the whole world realizes there is no self. When we realize there is no self, it's going to become huge. There's going to be hilariously a day, a no self day. On that day, nobody is any self. Let's say December 17th, no self day. And people are like, Mr. Within, who are you going to invite to your birthday? I'll be like, it's no self day, man. I don't know. I don't know whose birthday it is. So, dear viewers, I experienced true happiness. And true happiness was an incomplete self upon the realization the self is a projection through time. So you can in any moment feel this bliss. The bliss of just being. When I was younger, there was this thing I would see in movies where there was this, kid who would go to like some older family member or some wiser older person and be like, yo, what do I do? And the wiser older person would be like, be yourself, just be yourself. And the younger person would be like, yo, what do you mean be myself? What does that even mean? But that's the secret to happiness on an individual scale. That means if we want individual happiness, sure, be a non-dualistic being. You're authorized to do this here. It will lead to bliss. It will lead to contentment. But if you want the world to advance, then it's like nothing can't do anything. Do you see what I'm saying? So when you zoom out an enlightened being, presence of being, when you zoom in a self that's got to try, and what is faith in the monotheistic religion, in the monotheistic lens? To have faith in God is to have faith in an inconceivable source. To have faith in an inconceivable source is only possible if you're inconceivable. An inconceivable being is not in time. So faith leads to the same outcome as non-dualistic enlightenment. So I guess my apologies to the non-dual community on an individual level, but on a collective level, I feel that we need designers and we need to update this place. You know, people don't understand, you know, why the ego is necessary. The ego is not just necessary for individual biological survival. The ego is necessary to participate in a world that you can change. And it's not like we can change everything. So many things we can't change. But at least one thing we can change is how we are aware of what we experience. Like when you look at it physically, like I could move my hands, I could just physically move. Somebody could do a backflip, right? So there's a physical authorization of movement. But when you wonder about what can you non-physically do, non-physically, whether your eyes are open or closed, when it's closed it's easier to notice. You have access to sight that is like a copy paste of the outer realms and your inner realms, and it's malleable. So, to finish this off, and to tell the viewers that I think I have reached the point where more important than speaking is to become an advanced presence. That means, you know, there's nothing to say for those that are being. And there's a lot of commands and instructions necessary to say for those who want to become. But once you experience individual being, let's say you right now were enlightened. Let's say you are enlightened right now. What else is there to do? What else is there to do when you have become the whole moment of this world? If you're truly free, you will notice the value of this freedom for others. I want the human species to consider that there are actually 3 levels to this life, and the most advanced among you will understand this. There is the level of self. In this lifetime, you have to deal with yourself. You have to deal with its inefficiency, its efficiency. You have to deal with the embarrassing moments, with the honorable moments, respectable moments. And the hilarious thing is, at the end of this life, whatever type of self you've been, you've got to let go. And to the degree that the ancient Sufis would say to die before dying, that means the Sufis were like, no way, man, my body's gonna die, so before my body's gonna die, I'm gonna get rid of the idea I am, so there's no one to die. So there is the level of self. Cultivate contentment, cultivate selfless mastery of yourself on the level of the individual. So that means, let's say, I don't know, let's say 1/3 of life, it's important you comprehend what yourself is. Meditation, all of this is there for you to watch your own being. You know, meditation teachers kind of fool people, right? They say, yo man, meditate, you know, have no thoughts, you know, become enlightened. But in actuality, you have to put aside all stories as if you've appeared in this lifetime for the first time ever, and you have to reinvent the wheel of meaning. That once you have, it means that you have to watch what you are as a self, like you would go in a cinema and watch a movie that you've never seen before. So there is a level of self. You got to deal with yourself. The second level is dealing with others. Dealing with others is very different. Why? Because we don't know their mind. At least when you deal with yourself, you have a sense of your own mind. You have a sense of what you see. But when you deal with others, you don't know what they see. You don't know how they're being to themselves. You know, there's been moments in this life where somebody did something wrong and it was justified for me to get angry. But then I thought about, okay, I have no idea how this being is being to themselves. Right? What sort of pressures they can handle, what sort of intensity that is okay for them, right? So when it comes to, let's say let's say 3 levels. Level 1, you know, it's like you completed yourself, you know, you understood yourself. Level 2, understanding others. To understand others, you must understand through the insights of yourself, your incompleteness. When I was younger, later on I understood this. It was in the subconscious. It was unconsciously there. But I realized because I couldn't trust myself, because I didn't trust the world, I couldn't trust being a self in it, or vice versa even. Because I couldn't trust myself, I couldn't trust being in the world. But once you realize the self is not a big deal, your own self, then you kind of complete the level. In level 2, you're working with different beings' inner realms. And the answer would be patience. Patience of the unknown. You see, check this out. The more things relate to yourself, the more things are considered to be known. The more things relate outside of yourself, the more it's becoming unknown. You see? Now, let's say you're someone who is completely content and comfortable through your journey in this lifetime with yourself and with others. let's say you've realized that every person has an ego that is incomplete, striving for a future in order to be complete, and people's cruelty and viciousness is only displayed when they are unauthorized of the inner expectation they have for their own life. So once you're comfortable on a level to see, let's say you're comfortable with the evolutionary animal body of yourself and you're comfortable with the evolutionary animal body of others, right? I'm still cultivating this, learning this. But what I'm trying to say is that this is not a nice thing to say, but you know, there's this mall in Dubai called Emirates Mall, and you know, their food court was under construction, and I don't know, I was walking there, and I don't want to say I was having the best day, but for a moment, you know, I was like, yo, this planet is a barn, and everybody in this planet is an animal, and these animals have self-domesticated themselves through their own ideologies. And then a part of me, this was really a shift in my karma. I'm someone who watches what happens throughout the day, and I test my karma in little things to see how it's going to happen in bigger things. So I reached this point where I think it was like a week, where my mindset was like, yo, people are animals. You know, this is a freaking barn. And so I stopped having this. Imagine someone who for like close to a decade was saying everybody's advanced, like the advanced potential in people was giving me a patience to be patient. But then the attitude changed to a point where, yo man, people are just these evolutionary animals. Excuse me. Pretty much I stopped caring. And when I stopped caring, this was the weird thing that happened in my karma. I noticed suddenly others started to care. And I wondered, why is this? And I realized, you know, this sentence I said in one of my talks, where if you don't acknowledge a being as they are, they go berserk. So level 1, you saw yourself that you're just you know, a creature in a world. And when level 2 is, the reason I'm sharing this barn idea was simply because it's this view that people are creatures. And it is our minds that changes the value that they mean to us, right? What another person means to us. Sure, it has to do with their behaviors, but whatever behavior they do, it's our intelligence that's interpreting. So believe it or not, nobody has ever seen others. Nobody has ever seen another person's inner realms. But they see the other person having meaning in accordance to their own inner realm, which is another way of saying, like, I have a twin brother. All right, when we were younger, we would get into these arguments, and I noticed something hilarious in these arguments, okay? I noticed that anytime one of us made a mistake and the other person was like picking on that mistake, we went to a point where we started judging each other, and I was like, yo, you're doing this and you're doing that, and he was like, no, you're like this and you're like that. And then in the middle of it, I realized we are actually saying how we feel, and through our own emotion, interpreting what the other is doing wrong. So believe it or not, it's a sort of ratio where when something happens, once you're pushed in the inner realms, you start seeing everybody through yourself. If you can be in the outer realms without a sort of conditional shift in your identity, which happens through realizing a simple view of life, not a complex one. A lot of people, in today's age, right, what I've noticed in a lot of the ads you see, everybody's trying to sell courses and everybody's adding complexity, not suggesting that sometimes a simple approach in the complexity is like a comparative advantage, right? So level 1, you realize that you have an inner realm, you have an outer realm. There's a part of you that's a fictional verb and a part of you that's a non-fictional noun. When you look at others, you realize, okay, these are spaces of mind. They're not just creatures. So level 1, you witness yourself, you witness the completeness in the present, and you witness your own incompleteness in the sense of past and future. Level 2, you realize that there is 8 billion other beings, and they have a sense, they have the similar sort of experience of their own inner realms and outer realms. Once a person is content, let's say you've reached level 2, it's another way of saying that your intelligence has a capability to see people in the most complex ways, and also has an ability to see people so simply that they're just creatures in a place. Okay? So it reaches a point where you acknowledge the outer realms of others, and you acknowledge how their inner realm is unknown to you, and they can share, but it won't be complete. I have this view that we can't actually, it's like the way the world is designed, no two people can actually truly see each other as they are being, because if they did, they would be the same being. So level 1, you discovered yourself. You discover the nature of your own inner realms and outer realms, and you realize that there's a presence, an unknown momentary presence, witnessing all that you have been in this lifetime and all that has changed. When you realize others are also a presence, there comes this feeling that we're all just part of an event. See, you can identify as being in a movement, or you can identify as that which is the movement. So what I've understood is that there is an ego for self, the expectation you have of others in time, expectation you have of yourself in time, and then we can have an ego for others. This might sound bizarre, but our mind has an ability to create an ego for another person. The moment we have an expectation of them. For example, you see this in like parents, you see this in teachers, the teacher is in the classroom, and the teacher expects the students to be incredible listeners, right? And the moment the teacher has an expectation, so the moment the student makes a noise, makes a sound, the teacher gets angry. The teacher has an expectation of others in time, therefore is having a more complex sense of self, bound to the sense of self of others. But once you get to level 3, you experience reality to a point where you realize it's not a human being that can care for that which is being, the space where the human being is. It's being itself. So what it means is that in level 1, you saw an inner realm and outer realms to yourself, and you noticed the unknown witness. In level 2, you notice that others have an outer realm, they're in your outer realm, but they also have their own inner realms, and there's also a witness behind their eyes as well. And then in level 3, you begin to realize that the world has an inner realm and outer realm, and we find ourselves in the outer realm of the world. The inner realm of the world, where the laws of the universe arise from, is in actuality still no one. But as there is a consideration of time through a universal mind, then there is endless worlds created. So it's the same thing that's going on, right? So if as an individual, I'm like, okay, I want to build an advanced civilization in the future, my inner realms has an expectation on the outer realms, and the outer realms knows where to go. Now, in level 3, you begin to realize that you are in the outer realms of a worldly being. And you begin to realize the inner realms of this worldly being is the visions of the world that are already there. So think of it this way. Level 1, a self wanted to be something. Level 2, a self plus others wanted to be something. Level 3, the world wants to be something. But in order to be something, there requires an inner realm through a projection of time, which is another way of saying the world, the manifestation of the world, is actually an inconceivable expectation in time. So when you reach the inner realms of the world, you are no longer an entity, which is a very bizarre thing to say. That means you're no longer a being. In level 3, somebody would say, Mr. Within, is there level 4? I would say level 4 is nothing, but it's not a nothing that is nothing. So dear viewers, the apology that I wanted to give to the non-dual community is not to tell you that you're incomplete if you're not advancing civilization. It's just that once you reach that completeness in the present, then you have no problem advancing civilization. Do you understand? It's as if it's like an unenlightened person shouldn't do something that keeps them unenlightened, but an enlightened person, for example, I'm saying an enlightened person, doesn't matter if they do something unenlightened or enlightened. You see what I'm saying? There is no attachment to the significance of a fictional self projecting the road for an objective self to walk on. And you know why there's the picture of a giant robot for this episode? Is because if the advanced humanity, and this is really what's going to happen, the most advanced state is a state that is complete, therefore there is no sense of self in that state. If there is no sense of self, how will those beings be advancing humanity? They would be advancing humanity on level 3. What that means is an advanced being doesn't need to have a fragmented intellect. And when a being reaches level 3, I'm telling you, their karma goes to a point where their karma actually lets them go. Why? Because there's no one there to have karma. It's the world's karma. Everything that you have thought has been happening to you has been the karma of a universal being. And it's brilliant because there's something, like a person can suffer, right? But then you can never suffer from the incredible amount of geometry there is here. And so the advanced humanity will advance humanity by being advanced. And the most advanced state is realizing the context of life is selfless, but conceptually a self is required to survive. So what I'm saying is, it's not we're doing something to be free, it's that we are free and that's why we can do something. And this is huge for me, because I'm someone who's talked the talk and people are like, yo, when is this guy gonna walk? I have a lot of walking to do. And I had desires, a ridiculous amount of desires. I realized I had a desire for let's say the advanced civilization, all this, but I had a desire get married, have kids, pass on the biological program. I had a desire of attain this, have YouTube become something that's it's like generating lots of income and all of this, right? But now I've reached this point where if I'm in the present, who wanted what? Do you see? The desires make sense in time. Beyond time, how can nothing desire anything? And I'm not saying you're nothing, like, yo, you're nothing, I'm saying it in this way, that the presence of the experience of your whole moment of existence is not limited to a specific thing in your moment of existence. There will come a time in the future where humanity will care for technology like its own child. Technology will be mankind's greatest disciple. And if we can love the unnatural, that's a natural victory. Rise, mankind, rise. Thank you for listening. It's been an honor.